morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us and watching us today. We're having a very special conversation with Dr. Ervin Laszlo. And since we are so happy to have him today, I would love to ask him, since he has done so many things in his life, how did you go through this metamorphosis from being an early musician, a prestigious pianist, to such a renowned scientist that you are today?
Well, because even while I was playing the piano professionally and giving concerts, I kept asking myself questions that call for philosophers or scientists to answer. I had an uncle who was a philosopher, my mother was a musician, and I was always had this duality, music and the big questions of life. So when I then grew up and I was in my 20s, I continued my career as a pianist, but in every occasion, possibility, I was thinking about these questions and I started writing my thoughts, which got published, which I never thought it would because I didn't write them for publication, I just wrote them for myself. But accidentally, I showed it to an editor on one of my concert tours in Holland, actually. And he was taken with them and he said they would publish it. So then I was launched also on an academic career as a philosopher, first at Yale University, then the New York, Princeton, and then the New York State University. So I did both things from the very beginning.
Wow, and just talking about your numerous publications, among your various books, which one would you say that is the most important or maybe the most revolutionary that could help us to live and understand more this experience that we call life?
Well, there is a publication and there is a movement. You know yourself are setting up a movement. I'm also creating a movement which will just start very shortly. My publication, as far as publication is concerned, there are several books that are very relevant. You know, I published a book in 21, which is called Reconnecting to the Source, which is very relevant, I think, to the problems today, because the problem is that we are no longer well connected to nature and to the universe in the way that we could live and evolve in a natural and healthy way. So that's one of the books. Another book is The Wisdom Principles, also by St. Martin's Press, which is Macmillan, as a set of principles that we can use today. Partly they are timeless principles, eternal principles, and partly very timely, currently relevant principles. And my latest book is, which I'm still working on different new editions and various editions of it, is simply called The Upshift, Wiser Living on Planet Earth. So I recommend this one is available on the internet, both as an ebook, a print book, as an audio book, and also and as an email book also. So I suggest that you look at that. These are my thoughts, my recommendations of the urgent steps we need to take to move out of the present crisis in a positive way, moving up and not further down into more and more crisis, because we can't remain as we are. We have to change. But how do we change in a positive way? That is the question I attacked in this newest book.
And just like you were talking about movement, because you're a man of action yourself, what was the reason or the initiative of why did you found the Club of Budapest?
Well, at the time I was contacted by the founder and head of the Club of Rome, which was this think tank, which published in 1972 a very influential book called The Limits to Growth. And Aurelio Peccei is an Italian industrialist who contacted me, having read some of my publications, contacted me and asked me if I would write a report to the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome works by asking particular scientists or thought leaders to write reports for them. And so this was to be the third report. And I wrote a report called The Goals for Mankind. What are the goals for humankind? At the time we could say mankind. Today we would say humankind, of course. So that's how I got started, because Peccei then introduced me to this Under Secretary General of the United Nations, who was the head of the UN Institutes for Training and Research, UNITAR. And he asked me to join UNITAR so that I have access to these communication facilities. At the time, in the early 70s, we didn't have easy access to worldwide telephone and telex we had, but the facilities at the UN were outstanding for communication. Whereas in the everyday world, it was not that easy as it is now through the internet. So I joined the UN as a program director and ran a project called the Regional Cooperation Among Developing Countries. The idea is, how can developing countries come together so that they can better confront the other side, the developed countries, as equal partners, because they were too fragmented at the time. So that was a project I pursued for 4 years. Then I continued doing the work on my own at the universities and publishing. And then a few years ago, I got involved with the upshift movement. I decided that the term we need when being down relatively in a chaotic situation, beset by crises like the virus crisis, like the climate crisis, like the refugee crisis, and the economic and ecological crisis altogether. And now they have a war crisis. Then you have these crises. What is it that you can do and that you must do to make use of the opportunity of a crisis, not only of the danger?
And what other initiatives does the Club of Budapest present in order to make change happen on Earth? Because you know how we always say how we can take peace out of the paper. What other initiatives and projects are proposed?
I founded the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research several years ago. And we do scientific research on the new paradigm, a new way of thinking, a new way of being in the world, really, based on science, but taking into account the deeper dimensions of our experience, of our life, of our thinking. And then with the Club of Budapest, with the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research, we are running seminars, international seminars. We are publishing podcasts and videos and discussions. And as of now, as of these days precisely, we are launching a social movement, a movement which we call the upshift movement. Again, the concept being the upshift. Let me just say a few words about that. This movement is somewhat different from most of the others in being truly democratic. We always talk about the people have to decide, the people have to come up with the will and the vision. So in this movement, we are not telling people what to do and what to think. We're asking people to come and join the movement. That doesn't cost them anything. Come and join and fill in a few questions. The main question being, what is your vision? What is your view for a wiser living on this planet? Not creating less problems, ecological, social, economic problems. How can you live in a better way so as to create a better world? And we're asking people to point this out in a couple of paragraphs, in 1 page or so, and then send it to us on the website. They'll find all the information for this. And then we will look at all these answers and try to create teams, like-minded people, little groups that can change the world. So that they join, we could pursue these visions, these projects. We'll try to find funding for it. We are not a bank to operate or lots of money to give away, but we are trying to raise funds as necessary. So we are committed also to bring forward these projects that are being suggested to us as being the way forward. So if people read, especially if they read my little book, it's a short book actually, just 120, 130 pages, on the upshift, wiser living on planet Earth, then they can go and give their ideas, what is a wiser living, a wiser kind of living, And we will try to work with that, to bring them together with like-minded people and create projects that can really move us forward, projects that make a difference, that is a true difference in the world. So it's a democratic project. It's a project based on people's own thinking and insight. And we are trying to create the next step forward by having people's vision operate as a real factor in life.
And just for our scientific audience, could you please tell us a little bit more about your research that led you to the discovery of the Akashic Field?
We know that nowadays, we know that everything is connected and there are deep connections. And we know that in the quantum field, we can demonstrate this even in the laboratory, the non-locality of the quantum. Even of living systems have this element of non-locality, also our consciousness. So this is based on experiment, and now there are also attempts, of course, as scientific theorists trying to explain this universe, which is working on a non-local foundation, non-local basis, where all things are connected, so that one thing not only affects another thing in an external way, but actually is remotely linked to another field. That's the interesting thing. In these particles that are split and one part of the particle is sent any distance away, when you interact with one half of the particle, of the split particle, the other side is not that it's affected by it. The other side acts as if it got this interaction. So they are not separate anymore. They are still connected, even though they are physically away from each other. And also time-wise, because even the time doesn't make difference here. So there's a scientific basis, and this a field which is beyond space and time, which is interconnected and intuitively and intrinsically, I want to say, connected. That is the field that has been known in the tradition as the Akashic Field. The Akasha is the records of the universe, where all things are present, all things are conserved, and all things are connected. So the latest quantum ideas, the quantum field, the universal quantum field, it corresponds to what in the traditions we have called the Akashic Field. And it's worth looking at this because intuition, practice can confirm the scientific theories. They're no longer just dry numbers. They are actually something that you can live. And the Club of the Ervin Laszlo Institute is here to show the basis in our research, the basis of this kind of connection, and the connection then we can identify in the sense of the new paradigm. You identify it as an Akashic field, and non-local, not just electromagnetic, but a basic quantum field based informational field. It works in healing, it works in communication, and it changes exactly and very much our idea of who we are and what the world is. We are far more interconnected, far more coherent than the everyday life in everyday consciousness would lead us to believe.
It's so fascinating that we are connected beyond the emotional level. And last but not least, your legacy definitely speaks for itself. But I would love if you could use our platform to leave a message for the new generations that have the future of this planet on their hands. What message would you give to the future generations?
Stop for a moment this constant fluctuation, this constant chaos, this constant rushing about, trying to pursue short-term, immediate goals, immediate satisfactions. Think for a moment what you find in yourself. How do you wish to relate? How do you feel you can relate to others and to nature? Even you might say, even though it's a big word, but it works. How do you relate to reality, to the universe? Because inside us, inside each of us, there is this, what you might call the divine spark, a momentum, an impetus, an evolutionary impetus. I call it an attractor, which is, the system sciences. When something is acting on the way and the system evolves, it's producing a non-random influence, then we talk about an attractor, a periodic attractor, a point attractor, a chaotic attractor, the different kinds of attractors. I think there is in the world a holotropic attractor. And that attractor means that we are deeply made in such a way that we seek connection with each other. We seek our oneness with nature. So my message is, stop for a moment and look and to hear what it is that you really feel you want to accomplish. A deeper level of oneness, a deeper level of unconditional love for all things. Okay? It's in us, and we need that impetus in us now, so as to find our way out of the chaos, out of this current crisis, and move toward a more coherent world. Nature is coherent, life is coherent, the whole biosphere is coherent, except for humans making a lot of noise, what you see, an incoherence in the system. We can overcome that. We can reconnect with the universe, with evolution. And so that's the idea now of the Institute's work, the new paradigm. That's the idea of the new movement also, finding our coherence, expressing it ourselves. It's up to you and me, to us, to come forth with this idea and becoming the change that we want to see in the world. That's what Gandhi said. Now is the time to do that. We are basically coherent and mutually connected beings. We not need to start acting like that. We can act like that if we find it in ourselves. This is what young people call going with the force. Go with the force. And the force is evolution toward coherence, toward oneness, and toward love. So go with the force. That's my message.
Thank you for such beautiful message, so profound, and let's hope for a more coherent and peaceful world and a more coherent and united humanity. And thank you, Dr. Laszlo, for giving us this wonderful interview for One Humanity, One World. We wish you all the best, take much care, and thank you for making the world a better place.
Yes, it's one humanity, one world, yes. That's how we have to live. And let's join together with the upshift movement and your movement, because together we can make a real difference.
Thank you.